It is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was yet another non-virtual get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Wednesday. I don't know what to say about today. It was a little bit of review, in all honesty. I think pretty much every one of the movements that we were doing was something that I was at least vaguely familiar with before. And it made it a little bit easier to do some of the parts. Although I always have difficulty getting my knees up over my head, so it was part of it at least was kind of challenging. And it was going from a north-south position to getting somebody into a triangle. It's a really slick triangle too. But the entire sequence was starting from north-south, pushing on your opponent's hips, assuming you're the person on the bottom, pushing on their hips to make some space, and then bringing your knees up to where they're between you and your opponent. And then, so say you're bringing your legs up, you want to put your right foot under their right armpit, and then bring your left foot up over their shoulder and drag them into a triangle as you kind of spin around. Because it's just fucking weird. Because you're upside down, you got to turn yourself right side up, but in the process of turning yourself right side up, you twist, and as you're twisting, you're pulling your opponent in between your legs, and as you're doing that, you're pulling them into a triangle and coming to where you're face up and have them in that triangle securely. And then the next part of the sequence was assuming your full posture, so posturing way up with your shoulders and your head back, and then I had trouble figuring out which leg to bring up, and my training and my tendency would be to bring my right leg up, to where I'm on my left knee and I'm on my right foot. And then, again, posturing really, really good. And what that does is it makes it really tough to maintain the triangle. And if they're not gripping like your arms or your neck or something to break your posture, and they're able to get back their shoulders back like that, it'll pop your legs open, just from that. And then the next part was, and I think this is where I was having trouble determining which leg to address, was because you got to go knee on belly. And it's weird because you're like doing a backwards knee on belly. Instead of facing their head, you're facing their knees. And one thing I found that made this a little bit easier was I collected my opponent's knees together, and I called it packaging, So I brought his legs together, and then I hooked the inside of his knee that I'm going to roll, kind of spin out to the other side with, because you got to do a back step, and I was having a lot of trouble just back stepping into the wind, while I've got my knee on this person's belly. And the other problem I was having was I was putting my knee way far over to where it was like over in front of his other hip, and that's too far over. You want it right in the middle. But I found that it gave me a little more leverage to put both of his knees together, because that put him flat. That made sure he was flat. And then I hooked his knee and then pushed his knee as I was stepping back. And I found that was a lot easier, bringing my leg around his body to where I was in that full, spun around position from a knee on belly. And so from there, it was sneaking your arm under your opponent's arm at the elbow and walking it up to where their bicep is touching their ear, and then capturing it from underneath their head. So you got like your left arm underneath their neck, and you're grabbing the tricep. And so from there, you push the arm over at the elbow, and you could get an arm triangle there, but this is assuming that this particular sequence was assuming your opponent was able to get their hand in there, and they're trying to phone home, right? And so I was getting this really well in that, I was getting him really tight, and he'd get his arm in there, and I would go ahead and put my hand on my bicep and get that part of the choke like fully secured before I address the hand. Then I move the hand over to the other side of his head, so I get that off of the get the old receiver back on the phone, and then replace his hand with mine. And so now my shoulder is right up under his chin, and I just got to flex just a little bit. Then tap, tap, taparoo. And so yeah, I really like that one. I like anything that involves that kind of sequence with regard to that choke. I'm not much for leg triangles, but I love arm triangles. So anything like a Dars or anything like that. Arm triangle, Dars choke. I think Japanese necktie is one too. Or is that a guillotine? I don't know. Sometimes I get confused. But anyway, so yeah, that was the totality of it. It was a relatively simple sequence that ended up in a very nice position. And I got in quite a few reps today. And fortunately for me, I was working with a really competent player. And I could swear he told me that he had done gi jiu-jitsu beforehand. But I'm not 100% on that. But anyway, so yeah, it was actually no. I knew him from the other gym that I went to. That's what it was. He's very, very good too. It was sad for him to have to come over in the same way that I did. Although I don't think they actually kicked him out. I think they weren't physically training, and he wanted to get back to physically training, and so he ended up where I'm at. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down with some music. Now that was short and sweet, but man, I need a shower. I need one badly. I sweat a lot today. And we're going to start off with some body count, because that's just what we do. But what song? As always, it's a challenge. Here we go. Body count, Carnivore, First Dance, here on Coin Metal. And that was Skindred with Nobody. And so, as far as what we're going to get into today, I tend to think about crypto and pretty much anything kind of internet related as being things that can exist without and in spite of corporate and government interference and or involvement. And because of that, I think that in the longer term, we're going to see at least some divergence between the two. That at some point or another, the internet will be facilitating its own lifestyle, its own kind of like ecosystem, but in the corporeal physical world, to a much greater extent. I was looking at the chart here for Bitcoin. Kind of interesting. I hadn't viewed it on this particular scale, but looking at it now, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, considering we just hit a low, but I don't know. Looking at their trajectory there, it looks like it's probably going to go back up. Anyway, I'm trying to find a specific thing here. Not that. Anyway, so like you got to think about like the sensitivity points of where this transition would be inhibited, if not stalled and or terminated. And one of them I can think of at least is the internet itself. That through a variety of infrastructure setups, or I'm not so keen on tech that I could go through and tell you all about firewalls and IP addressing and all that routing and all that other business that they would be doing to censor and inhibit your internet experience. And also to the extent that they would be trying to interfere in your financial affairs as well. And one of the things that keeps coming into my mind is that, Bitcoin, you're creating a network specifically to conduct transactions in Bitcoin, right? So what's to say that you couldn't do the same thing with the internet itself? Having a mutual carrier protocol that you quote unquote mine, and through various connections in infrastructure and whatnot, you get enough participants that you could kind of replace the internet with it. And I think that kind of thing is possible. Not only do I think it's possible, I think it's kind of likely in the longer term. Anyway, I got this thing here. It's called Mask. And I dug through their website already, and I found their quote-unquote gray paper. And so yeah, I think we should go into it, because it's only about 5 pages. Anyway, here it is. Mask. Internet freedom powered by you. And I didn't go too far into this, so I don't know exactly how they're talking about it being set up, whether or not it would involve existing ISPs or anything like that. I don't know. Anyway, continuing. Mask is a decentralized mesh network to support free and open internet. Preamble. Readers may be thinking, why is this document called a gray paper and not a white paper? Through discussion over the team's combined years of experience in business, technology, cryptocurrency, and project management, an interesting idea was proposed. One of the Mask team decided that there had to be an alternative to the mainstream idea of releasing a white paper. White papers are exactly what they sound like, written in black and white, and often outlining definitive goals and deadlines. This gray paper will be a living and evolving document that can be updated on a needed basis or needs basis with accurate information, all the while providing enough starting information for readers to appreciate the overall vision and purpose of the project. Through this, Mask aspires to not only be transparent in their goals and intentions, but also avoid hype, disappointment, and misinformation. Introduction. Mask is a community-driven project aimed at solving the problem of internet censorship by repressive regimes. The project committee is addressing this by building a decentralized mesh network which happens to also be censorship resistant. By doing so, it will allow content available on the World Wide Web to be accessible to anyone and everyone with an internet connection, all while allowing users to both share internet freedom and have an incentive to dedicate their excess bandwidth to the network. Mask intends to deliver an open source solution to a growing real-world set of issues through a unique approach combining blockchain application, network encryption, software design, self-healing autonomous network structures. These use cases of Mask Node and the Mask Network are central to the whole purpose. These include providing censorship resistance from repressive regimes, encouraging freedom of information across the ClearNet, regardless of geographical location, increasing user accessibility to freedom-based applications such as cryptocurrency, open source development platforms, etc., promoting privacy of personal information. After Mask achieves these goals, there are other products to be created that form a suite of services to make up the decentralized web. Mask Network's vision is that its software attracts over 1 million users across millions of devices and creates an ecosystem of applications that leverages the decentralized mesh network. Solution: Power of 3. The software solution is made up of 3 design components. Encrypted. Node allows and encourages encrypted connections, but mainly addresses operations on a lower level. It operates on standard protocols such as TLS, SSL, and HTTPS. Untraceable. Data is sent through a multi-hop network route that changes too quickly to trace. Clandestine. In progress. Will hide not only the data, not only the route, but also the very fact that the user is using mask at all. You can read more about this in detail on the knowledge base. And we may do that tonight, I don't know. Founding principles. Decentralized governance. The mask team has a core group of founders and external advisors. A future governance model will be explored, which allows Mask Network project to be fully decentralized. There will be no CEO, and practical methods are applied to ensure no one person controls the entire project. Community spirit. The Mask team have all been born of other projects and communities. They understand that without the true spirit of by the community for the community, the network and thus the project will cease to exist. From these humble roots, the team want to actively grow the community and realize the full potential that the project can bring to the modern world of internet communication. Communication. Privacy. Mask intends to keep user privacy as an utmost priority, as without true privacy of the network's participants, the network cannot grow to its full potential across the world to restricted countries, where access to such a solution could come with severe penalty from government and watchdog agencies. Similarly, members of the committee will remain pseudo-anonymous until such time that the network will be completely immutable and there is little to no external threat to them. Oh, dude, that'll be never. Some of the committee are willing to be openly identified. Project milestones. Docker-style CLI interface. Completed. V2 undergoing further development. Mask has developed on the skeleton behind any GUI and is now based on an interactive command line interface, which will be adapted to be used in all further iterations of the software. This UI gateway interface has been implemented and allows UIs to communicate directly with the running node instance, masked, or masked. The interfacing itself is handled across WebSockets broadcasts, handled by UIs and nodes across the UI gateway. A configuration file can be set up and referenced by the software daemon, and then mask node can be initialized by the user with a few simple commands on a command line prompt in Windows, Linux, or Mac. Mask. After more of the UI gateway infrastructure, Mask Node UL version 2 design is developed and implemented. UI. Further UI components and GUIs can be designed and built on top of the Mask Node software for more user-friendly adoption and fully fledged visual features. Graphic user interface completed. V2 undergoing further development. Through the power of the amazing MaskD community, a team developed a streamlined GUI that operates by communicating through the new Mask Node UI V2 gateway over WebSocket broadcasts and messaging. The GUI is a first browser-based solution for alpha and beta type testing with community and is being developed into further iterations of GUIs. These may be based on other platforms or languages for greater user experience and streamlined features. Electron desktop app in progress. In parallel to the browser version, an Electron-based desktop app is being developed, which can be run on the three main platforms: Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. This will be completed with new visual UX, UI, and integrate new features for a better user onboarding experience. Auto port forwarding in progress. A major stumbling block with the software is communicating the traffic in and out of the node through users' routers. The development team are automating this process so users will not have to configure their routers manually. Additional key milestones: clandestine routing, neighborhood modes, terminal intelligence, network payments testing. Mask project GitHub is open source. Mask developers start with open source code from Substratum. The codebase was created and developed by Substratum LLC, a registered U.S. company based in Tennessee, under the GPL v3 license. All source code derived from Substratum is cited as such and credit given properly. Tokenomics. The Mask ERC20 token will be a pure utility token. Its primary purpose is to provide a monetization component within the node software to allow microtransactions between nodes providing services to each other within the network. These services are measured and values are individually set by the user of each node, creating a free and open market within the network itself for users to provide their bandwidth and node routing services. This monetization component is inherent to the security of the network, as it ensures, number one, that users can both exchange a token to prove they are a reliable consumer or server of the services. 2. Reduce the likelihood of large-scale network attacks such as botnets and DDoS. 3. Bad actor nodes or nodes not clearing their consuming token debt will be banned or marked in a delinquent list, thus rendering them inactive nodes. Smart contract. Mask is using a clone of OpenZeppelin ERC20 token smart contract adapted by Substratum, which was audited by QuantStamp in 2018 through 2019. It was modified with a single constructor to provide protection from double spending attacks. Our smart contract on Solidity can be viewed publicly on our verified contract address on etherscan.io. Token supply and development. The Mask V2 utility token was announced on 17th October 2020. Detailed information can be referenced on Medium. Total token supply 37.5 million. Airdrop swapped 1,304,570 tokens rather. Circulating initial advisor pool 5 million. Committee 9 million, and development and marketing 22,195,430. No further tokens will be minted or mined. Marketing or development and marketing allocations from the 22,195,430 tokens being released, they will be allocated toward key areas of project activity. Marketing and liquidity 11,500,000, development community 9 million, Initial staking reward pools, 1,695,430. Token releases. Upon minting, non-circulating tokens will be distributed from the developer wallet, unissued supply, into the 3 relevant wallets, according to a time release schedule. Development and marketing. Upon minting, 5,500,000 1,500,000 released monthly thereafter for 12 months. Committee, upon minting, 1.4 million released monthly thereafter for a total of 8 months. Note that these tokens are made available to provide V2 token liquidity to link swap and staking reward programs. Divided by founding members. Okay. Get involved. Do you have a passion for internet freedom? Freedom of information for the world? Do you have knowledge of Rust or similar programming and would like to volunteer some of your time? Have you simply wanted to try and test a superior alternative to VPN or Tor? Join our community on Discord, Telegram, and contact us. So yeah, that was short and sweet. It seems like an interesting project. I don't know, this is a pretty sparse description and whatnot, but I don't know, I think it gave us a pretty base understanding of what they're trying to achieve and how they intend to achieve it. I would assume that it would be a grouping of everybody that's participating, and then there's like access to the network that their service provides. Very interesting. And I think that is the kind of thing that will be powering the internet in the not so distant future. Because I think the computers that we have these days, they're so much more powerful than they were in, say, 2000. Back in 2000, the computer that I've got as my desktop might have been somebody's server. Maybe not that bad, but I dial it back to the 90s. It most certainly would be. But the point being is that I think they're getting powerful enough that with simple hardware, we could be developing small networks together that collectively could be connected together, and the total resources for storage and processing power and all that other shit would be made available to the open public. I don't know. It sounds kind of pie in the sky thing, but I think it could work. I think between cell phones and just Bluetooth stuff, that we could in fact see that kind of network capability or network created. I don't know. I think it's a good project. Let's see how it. I think the idea of issuing tokens the way that they are is kind of stupid, but really, in my mind, the way to do it would be to have it to where the miners themselves are the network, kind of like Bitcoin was originally intended, and have the same type of rewarding schedule, to where it's once every 10 minutes. And then there's a halvening once every 4 years, and you figure it out for 100 years or something like that, and set that as your schedule, and let that guide how many you're going to issue and so on and so forth. And of course it would help to do things like adopt, like when you're looking at Bitcoin, its adoption cycles, when it was good, when it was bad, from the date of origin forward, and look for commonalities. If you're noticing that at first there's zero interest, and then 2 months there's a little bit of interest, but there's always something that kind of keeps the majority of the market from joining in, and then it progresses as it goes along. I'm sure that if one were to go through a wide variety of cryptocurrency projects, they could locate these sticking points and find out which ones are just non-existent or were created, out of ignorance for what exactly was going on and how the cycle would operate. I mean, none of us are like, I don't think anyway, prophets or anything like that, sitting over a crystal ball making predictions about how these things are going to go and how interested the market is going to be and for how long. There just isn't anybody that can tell you that. They can make recommendations, though. And, I think that if someone were so motivated to go back through and just look at the cycles, it's like, okay, there's zero interest here, and then like 2 months in, there's more interest. 4 months is like peak interest and like peak computer capability. There's always this point where the coin gets valuable enough that people get greedy and they dedicate more electricity and more bandwidth to it, and that throws everything off for everybody else, and they're not getting rewarded enough, and so the interest drops. That kind of thing. Okay, and I would be willing to bet that there is like a common curve. Within the same parameters, a common curve. If you were to take a series of proof of work coins and overlap their level of interest, overlap the amount of hashing power that's being dedicated to the network, and then look back and at points where you're seeing commonalities between them. When you overlap them, you'll see that the peaks are hitting at the same points, same general points. Within maybe like a month or whatever. I mean, there's going to be some threshold where it's off just a little bit, but there'll be general points that you can note, and then you'll want to be looking through those and looking in a historical sense. Looking up those coins for a given time period on, say, Google or some other search engine. And trying to find out if there were any specific issues going on with those points or at those points. Is there some issues with the network? Did they lose a lot of hashing power? Did they gain a lot of hashing power? I mean, what kind of things were driving the interest? And I think there's enough data sets out there, and there's enough reams of data out there that people could be overlapping them and examining them and finding this metadata that I'm talking about. And I think if you did that and used it to guide your possible development path, that you probably do better than a lot of coins that just, they pop into existence. Somebody has an idea, they write a whole bunch of shit down, they spaghetti code it together. They get some real coders to help them out, so they're not just copying and pasting other people's projects. And then they launch it, and then they just hope that their ideals of what governance means and what their distribution schedules are and their distribution mechanisms, all of that stuff is something that the market should be telling you. And like I said, the best you can do is use it as guide points. Not even goalposts, guide points. Like, Dogecoin, it launched at this point, it dropped at this point, and then it fumbled about for a bit. Look at it today, there's a whole bunch of shit happened in between. What caused that shit to happen? What was the shit? What was the shit's impact? Those are the things that can guide you. And really, it's when I hear people talking about like regulatory clarity being the underlying, the key to the success of their project, I can tell you right away they're already lost. They're looking for something that other than the market to tell them what the market wants, or how to do it, or how to address the market. Invariably, that party is going to be incorrect. So, again, look back at other people's mistakes. The smart person looks at other people's mistakes for lessons that they don't need to learn themselves or need to relearn themselves with their own money and their own time. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. Here we go. Vola, The Same War, here on Coin Metal. And that was Dark Angel with Sensory Deprivation. And so, the next thing I got up here, it's on decrypt.co. Congress inches closer to making crypto regulations clearer. This is by Jeff Benson. It was authored on April 21st, 2021. Let's see if my program is hung up here. Check and verify. Yeah, I'm going to have to close the program, reopen the program. It's probably because I've got way too many tabs open on my browser, but oh well. It's how these things go. It's just a thing, you know? Anyway. So, as I was saying, Congress inches closer to making crypto regulations clear. Jeff Benson, so yes, penis. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed legislation that, if approved by the Senate and signed by President Biden, would make clear the rules surrounding cryptocurrencies classified as securities or commodities. The Eliminate Barriers to Innovation Act, introduced by North Carolina Republican Patrick McHenry, would, quote, direct the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission to jointly establish a digital asset working group. That working group would be composed of both SEC and CFTC employees, as well as fintech companies working in the digital asset sphere, financial firms overseen by either agency, academic researchers, and investor watchdog groups. Smaller fintech firms and organizations that support underserved businesses will also be represented. Yeah, whatever. The working group will be given 1 year to analyze the country's current laws and regulations pertaining to digital assets. Congress wants the working group to answer several things, including how regulations are affecting markets for cryptocurrency markets and how those markets could be fairer, more efficient, and more transparent, whether U.S. laws are making the country more or less competitive in financial technology, and what security standards should exist for crypto custodians and other intermediaries. It's also looking for recommendations on how the U.S. can reduce fraud and price manipulation in crypto markets or otherwise protect investors, as well as how crypto firms can best comply with the Bank Secrecy Act, which obligates financial institutions to combat money laundering and prevent terrorism financing. Quote, this is the first step in opening up the dialogue between our regulators and market participants and moving forward needed clarity, Representative McHenry in a press release. Clarity is certainly necessary, according to several crypto firms, even if they disagree about what digital asset regulations should ultimately look like. Last fall, Ripple Labs executive chairman Chris Larson openly discussed moving the company out of the U.S. Quote, the whole tenor continues to be one of frustration that we don't have more clarity and we don't have more of a pro-U.S. approach, he said in October 2020. Other crypto firms have sought out former legislators and regulators in order to remain compliant while maintaining good relations with D.C. Just this week, for instance, Binance U.S. appointed former comptroller of the currency Brian Brooks to serve as CEO effective May 1st. Holy shit, that's interesting. Basic questions have remained also about when digital assets are classified as securities, i.e. investment contracts, and when they are commodities, i.e. tradable goods, or something else entirely. SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce has proposed a safe harbor for digital assets, which would provide a 3-year grace period for crypto assets that might be classified as securities to sufficiently, quote, decentralize, the exact meaning of which is still being fleshed out. At the end of that period, they can register securities if still necessary. The SEC and CFTC's participation in the working group should help iron out these issues, as both agencies have occasionally taken ownership of various crypto projects. The CFTC, for instance, oversees the trading of certain Bitcoin investment products, such as derivatives contracts, while the SEC claims authority over most Ethereum-based tokens sold by companies to raise funds. The SEC also sees Ripple's XRP as a security, and an illegal one at that. The company is currently fighting off a $1.5 billion lawsuit. Each agency operates under its own rules, making coordination vital. The Eliminate Barriers to Innovation Act initially passed out of the House Financial Services Committee. It was co-sponsored by Democrat Stephen Lynch, who chairs the committee task force on financial technology, as well as Republican lawmakers Warren Davidson, Ted Budd, and Glenn Thompson. Okay. I've said this before a million times on the show, that any attempt to regulate what's going on in crypto is a complete waste of time and money. All you're going to do is turn kids into criminals. That's it. That's all any of this bullshit will ever do. Now, the thing is, the difference between them being criminals just because you made up a whole bunch of bullshit rules to prosecute them by, and them being criminals because they were fraudulently accumulating people's money or gathering it or selling something under false pretense or some bullshit. They were committing an actual crime. They intended to commit fraud. I mean, really, that's like, to me, it's the whole regulatory structure is assuming you're guilty of fraud. So you have to register with the CFTC and or the SEC, or you're going to get busted because you're doing something illegal because these entities haven't been put in charge of your shit. You know, the whole essence of cryptocurrencies is permissionlessness, and that's you deploy your shit. If people want to use your shit, they're free to use your shit. They're free to modify your shit as they see fit. But that it's something that it's for the public to determine, the market to determine. It's not something for the CFTC to determine, or the SEC, or FinCEN, or the OCC, or any of these other entities. That's not for them to decide. And we've seen this play out in multiple countries. We've seen it play out in China most explicitly. And the interesting thing about that is that they're stuck in this loop where they don't know how to address it. They don't know if they want to make it illegal. They don't know if they want to invest in it. They don't know if they want to let their public invest in it. But the thing is this, that it keeps generating income. You know, their citizens are making money doing something on a global scale and bringing that money back to the mainland China. And so it's like, well, why do we want to make that illegal? You know? I mean, so what? We don't have any control over it. Is eventually it's going to make its way into the markets and the economy that we do control. And so, again, this is the big cat and mouse game that is being played out here. That regulators and governments in general and banks and corporations, they don't know how to handle it. They don't know if they want it. They're making enough money on it that they don't know if they want to kill it. And, you know. And so I think the idea of trying to get any regulator to weigh in on, something that your kid neighbor creates. I mean, really, is it anybody's business who's involved in it? In my mind, no. These are entirely voluntary projects. There is no gun to your head forcing you to involve yourself in any of it. But again, it's easy enough to demonstrate that there was criminal intent involved or something like that. You can look at the bank records, you can look at the notes between participants. Most of that stuff is available or acquirable if you've got a warrant. But that's assuming, of course, a crime has actually happened, and that you're not just punishing the crime of innovating and creating. If you do consider that to be a crime, then I guess there's something wrong with you. But let's take a look at this thing. Eliminate Barriers to Innovation Act of 2021, H.R.1602, 117th Congress, blah, blah, blah. Sponsor, Representative McHenry Patrick, Republican of North Carolina. I guess that was District 10. Let's see if we can get the text. It was presented. It's not actually on this page. Where the hell is it? So it hasn't passed House. It's been introduced, has not passed House or passed Senate, hasn't been to President, has not become law. Well, shish kebab. I mean, if you really want to find it, well, here we go. H.R. 1602, 17th Congress, to direct the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and Securities and Exchange Commission to jointly establish a digital asset working group and for other purposes. In the House of Representatives, March 8th, 2021, McHenry himself, Mr. Lynch, and Mr. Thompson of Pennsylvania, Mr. Budd, and Mr. Davidson introduced the following bill, which is referred to the Committee on Financial Services and in addition to the Committee on Agriculture, for the period to be subsequently determined by the Speaker, in which case for consideration of such provisions as fall within the jurisdiction of the committee concerned. Let me see how many pages this thing is. Oh, it's not very long. A bill to direct the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission to jointly establish a digital asset working group and for other purposes, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as Eliminate Barriers to Innovation Act of 2021. Section 2, Working Group to Support Innovation with Respect to Digital Assets. Establishment. Not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this section, the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission will jointly establish a working group to be known as the SEC and CFTC Working Group on Digital Assets to carry out the report required under subsection C1. B. Membership. Number 1, in general, the working group shall be composed of members appointed in accordance with paragraph 2. 2. The appointment of members. A. Representatives of commissions. The Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission shall appoint an equal number of employees of each such commission to serve as members of the working group. B. Representatives of non-governmental stakeholders. Appointment. The Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission shall each appoint an equal number of non-governmental representatives to serve as members of the working group, except that such number of members may not be greater than or equal to the number of members appointed under subparagraph A. Required members. The members of the working group appointed under Clause 1 shall include at least one representative from each of the following. Number 1, financial technology companies that provide products or services involving digital assets. Number 2, financial firms under the jurisdiction of the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Commodities Future Trading Commission. 3, institutions or organizations engaged in academic research or advocacy relating to digital asset use. 4, small businesses engaged in financial technology. 5, investor protection organizations. 6, institutions and organizations that support investment in historically underserved businesses. C, no compensation for members of the working group. I, federal employee members. All members of the working group appointed under subparagraph A shall serve without compensation in addition to that received for their services as officers or employees of the United States. 2, non-federal members. All members of the working group appointed under subparagraph B shall serve without compensation. C, report. In general, not later than 1 year after the date of the enactment of this section, the working group shall submit to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission and the relevant committees a report that contains A, an analysis of the legal and regulatory framework related to and related developments in the United States relating to digital assets, including the impact that lack of clarity in such regime, the lack of clarity in such framework has on primary and secondary markets in digital assets, and 2, how domestic, legal, and regulatory regimes relating to digital assets impact the competitive position of the United States and developments in other countries related to digital assets and identification of how these developments impact the competitive position of the United States, and B, recommendations for the creation, maintenance, and improvement of primary and secondary markets in digital assets, including for improving the fairness, orderliness, integrity, efficiency, transparency, availability, and efficacy of such markets. For standards concerning custody, private key management, cybersecurity, and business continuity relating to digital asset intermediaries, and for best practices to reduce fraud and manipulation of digital assets in cash, leveraged, and derivative markets, improve investor protections for participants in such markets, and assist in compliance with anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism obligations under the Bank Secrecy Act. 2. Report limited to SEC and CFTC authorities. The analysis and recommendations provided under subparagraphs A and B of paragraph 1 may only relate to the laws, regulations, and related matters that are under primary jurisdiction of the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Commodities Future Trading Commission. D. Non-applicability of FACA, or the Federal Advisory Committee Act, 5 U.S.C. I don't know what that means, shall not apply to the working group. C. Termination. In general, the working group shall terminate on the date that is 1 year after the date of the enactment of this section, except that the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the chairman of the Commodities Future Trading Commission may jointly extend the working group for a longer period, not to exceed 1 year. 2. Second report, in the case of extension. In the case of an extension of the working group under paragraph 1, the working group shall, not later than the last day of such extension, submit to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Commodities Future Trading Commission, and the relevant committees a report that contains an update to the analysis and recommendation required under subparagraphs A and B of subsection C1. F. Definitions in this section. Bank Secrecy Act. The term Bank Secrecy Act means A. Section 21 of the Federal Deposit Insurance Act, 12 U.S.C. 1829b. B. Chapter 2 of Title 1 of Public Law 91-508, 12 U.S.C. 1951, et sec. And C. Chapter 2 of Chapter 53, Subchapter 2 of Chapter 53 of Title 31 United States Code. 2. Historically underserved businesses. The term historically underserved businesses means women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and rural businesses. This is fucking institutional racism, sexism, and classism. Fuck you. Relevant committees. The term relevant committees means the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives, B. the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs of the Senate, C. the Committee on Agriculture of the United States, the House of Representatives, and D. the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry of the Senate. 4. Working group. The working group means the working group established under subsection A. So, let's think about the implication here. They think that by this law, they're going to be helping historically underserved businesses, meaning women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and rural businesses. Now, see, I'm in a rural area, so, that's good for me, right? But I don't think it's their place to be making these kind of determinations, or for these parties specifically. Who gives a fuck if it's women-owned or men-owned, if it's going to do something wonderful for humanity? That's like all of us. So, why should the gender or sex of an individual involved in such a project be the determining factor in how they're going to treat the entity involved in it on a regulatory basis? To me, this is a big step backward, and it's to create more barriers to innovation. They're basically saying white people need not apply. It sounds so fucking ridiculous to me. Or, white males need not apply. Because it says it's to help women. It doesn't discriminate between white and black women, though. So, I guess there's that. Give me a fucking break. This is to create more barriers to innovation, not to eliminate any. But they're going to find out through their working group. If they actually have a legitimate working group that is not exclusively fucking ideologically driven, where they hire specifically racist people that hate white people to make analysis and recommendations and reports about what should be done and how this fucking market should be treated. I find it I find this very legislation offensive. I mean, really, who the fuck are these people to be making such determinations, trying to pick winners and losers according to genitalia and color of skin and economic standing, in geographic location. If you're poor rural, good on you. If you're rich suburbanite, no, you're completely fucked. It doesn't matter if what you invented will change the world. It doesn't matter if it's just your parents' wealth and nothing that you created yet. No, the fact that you're white and you're male, that disqualifies you from any kind of innovation. You can't participate. I don't know that that's how they'll actually exercise it, but the very fact there would be any such consideration in legislation, I find offensive. But I could tell you this: if they are making those kind of placements where they put in people that I guess they can't pay them and they can't give them any kind of compensation, that's interesting. Hey, I want you to work for a year on this thing. Could determine how we deal with money in this country for the rest of your life, but we're not going to pay you for it. We're not going to compensate you any for it. That's basically saying, yeah, and all of the banks and all of the existing MSPs will be free to bribe you and lavish you with whatever your heart may desire during this 1 year working group time, unless you cut in the representatives that are involved in this, if you cut them in on the largesse that's being lavished upon you, then maybe we'll extend the period of the working group a little longer, make sure everybody's getting a cut. It's really funny to me, because from the top down, it just looks like a whole bunch of parties that are completely uninvolved in crypto projects, pointing at it as if it's a big old pie, and like they're going to cut it up and they're going to divvy it amongst themselves and cut everybody else out. To me, this is completely silly. Because that pie, the only reason that it exists is because it was worth it to somebody to participate in its creation. And if you go burdening it with shit like that, they're not going to bother to create that pie. If they know that, via some regulatory bullshit or whatever, that you're just going to swoop in and fucking gank it from them, go divvy it up and cut them out, they're just not going to create it. Or, better yet, they're not going to bother to do it within a jurisdiction that you have any control in. And then you'll be putting the U.S. further behind as far as innovation is concerned. Very, very short-sighted thinking. Okay, and I guarantee, I almost guarantee this. I mean, I don't know, man. We've got some really stupid people representing us at this time. And so it's questionable as to whether or not they'll actually make this realization. But I will tell you this right now. This is the one fact that keeps any of this shit legal in oppressive regimes such as, say, like Russia or China, where they're like totalitarian regimes. They say it goes, right? The only reason that crypto still exists and is still flourishing in these places is because A, they don't actually have absolute control, but B, it's creating money. It is creating money. It's creating innovation. It's creating fucking economic activity where there wasn't any before. And they're noting the competitive advantage that that's giving them, in contrast to the United States or other world powers. And they're looking at it, and they come to that realization every single time they get some monkey that says, "Oh, we gotta regulate this shit. We gotta have some more clarity. We gotta clamp down on it. We gotta get some control over it." These financial, like the architects of their economy or whatever, people that are making the economic decisions, whatever they may be, U.S. Treasury equivalent or whatever, they take a look at it and they're like, well, fuck, that's gonna nuke half of my shadow ops that I've got going on, that I'm generating most of my income from. That's gonna fuck over a lot of people, so including me specifically. So I'm not going to sign this thing, and I'm going to encourage all of my business partners and associates not to sign this fucking thing either. And that's where it goes. It just ends. Or like in China, they just quit talking about it. It's like it didn't exist. Nope, we didn't make that fuck up. We weren't talking about making Bitcoin completely illegal in this country. No, didn't happen. You know, and really, when I look at my feed, typically the only stories that I'm seeing concerning China and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general are that basically they're continuing with their CBDC project. Not that they're banning Bitcoin or that they're stopping mining or anything like that. And so what that tells you is that essentially this shit is kind of unstoppable, and that it will exist whether or not governments or corporations want it to. And our politicians know this. And they get right up to the precipice, where they can use it as some sort of cudgel or whatever over somebody's head. And when they see, no matter how many times they run up to somebody and threaten them with the cudgel, no matter how many times that happens, the market finds another way to express in a way that completely evades all of their capability of regulatory capture. And so they went through all that fucking effort for zero return. And in the meantime, that interest and that liquidity, it did not go away. It just went to other projects that they didn't have any grasp in. And when they see that and they see how much money is going into it, and they say, well, we could be getting some of that, or we can be getting none of it. Currently, we're getting none of it. It's only going to be so long before these regulatory entities come around to that fact, and they start understanding that really all they can really do is try to act as investigators and assist in prosecuting actual criminals. People that hack shit, people that steal shit. Tracking people's funds and getting them back for them has probably never been easier. And if they were dedicating the funds that they dedicate to interdiction of like money laundering and all that other bullshit exclusively to financial crime and analysis and enforcement and all that, they'd find that the vast majority of the crypto market is not facilitating any kind of criminal activity. That the vast majority of it that's being useful to anybody is being done with like retail purchases and whatnot. Only the difference is some of the things are being bought are illegal in some places and aren't illegal in others. And they're being transferred from one place to another. Hey, it's going to happen anyway. But the fact that it's going to happen in crypto, it's kind of entertaining, really. But it's the same with all of these currencies, and as I see it, it'll probably be the same until the end of time. That at any time the regulatory friction becomes too excessive or too successful, the market will find another way to express, and the regulators will be back getting fucking working groups together and wasting a whole bunch of time and a whole bunch of money. They're going to get maybe 2 to 6 months of effective use of this working group, and then after that it's like, oh fuck. The market adapts, writes a bunch of patches, gets around your exploit, and moves on. It's the way it's going to be. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. But where to go? What to play? Here we go. Amon Amarth, Crack the Sky, here on Coin Metal. And that was Sixth with Weavers of Woe. And it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. We will be back again on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. Watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And as far as our last dance is concerned, I actually had this one kind of queued up already. And hopefully, I'll be able to actually get it to work. So here it is. Testament. Practice what you preach. Last dance. Here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening. And y'all have an excellent evening. Good night.